So, guys, I want to talk about AEW Dynamite last night. And I really want to say that I did enjoy the show. And I do agree with what a lot of people are saying online that one issue of the show has been like a lot of logic holes. And the other issue that is a little concerning is that I really don't think they're doing a big show next week in Boston. They really should because, they're celebrating passing WCW's thing, but you only have one like match that is something you look forward to, which is going to be Mercedes versus Athena, even though I think that that should be a pay-per-view match for that to happen. But I want to go over the card and I want to talk about this show. So it opens with Pyro, and I like how they showed the logo of Double or Nothing, because that's good, like, foreshadowing and advertisement. And Moxley does his wannabe Bray Wyatt type of promo where he speaks in like riddles and rambling, and but mostly it's about people not living up to their full potential. And then it opens with Shibata and Moxley. So there was a lot of slow grappling, knife edge chops. This ended in less than 10 minutes. And I've heard the criticism online of people saying that this doesn't make any sense because Wheeler Yuta was in a match that was on the main event. And I kind of agree with that too. That I think that, okay, you want to start with something strong. You need to end with something strong. And the 9 o'clock main event needs to be strong. Like, those three parts need to be strong. So, I really think that, yes, I would agree with that. That, honestly, this should have been the main event because anything with the world title is the most important thing. And I also think, like, with Moxley and the Young Bucks, that's what people want to know about. And, either like or criticize. But that should have been the main event, really. So, I think that it's like what they said. They had a good choice for an open. I mean, they had for the choices that they've made, for the 9 o'clock main event, the main event of the show, and then also the beginning of the show. I think they had good choices, but in the wrong order. So I would have switched the main event and the opening, and I think you would have had something really good. So what happens is that the Young Bucks reveal that we did it for Hangman Adam Page, and don't forget who your friends are. So I think that that's also a little bad because weren't the Young Bucks bossing around and threatening Adam Page's career? So now they're on like a friendly basis for him. And I can understand that in a way where they really want to just manipulate Adam Page and the Death Riders become this one like super alliance. So this makes a bit of sense, really. But I think a lot of people are going to remember that didn't Adam Page defy the Young Bucks, during the Blood and Guts match last year. And I would also say the only good thing about this is that if Adam Page does a swerve and then he aligns with the Young Bucks, definitely, it shows you that they're really establishing that Adam Page can't trust Swerve and Swerve can't trust Adam Page because, they have friends that are, because Adam Page has former friends that are manipulating him a little bit by what they're trying to like get him to do, which is to join up again. And then the next thing that I want to say is that they also talk about why they did this for Jon Moxley. They said that this is a peace offering, and they think alike, and they also believe the roster should rise to the occasion. They should change the world. They both want to change the world. He commends them for taking over AEW because that's something that they wanted to do. And imagine if we worked back together. And they want him to come out and congratulate them. So there's a couple of things that I want to say. Like, I don't remember, because it's been a long time ago, it's not been compelling. But I researched it, and a lot of people are saying the exact same thing, which was the Young Bucks left Wrestle Dream, or the show after Wrestle Dream, after they lost to House of Private Party, because they were in fear of the Death Riders. And I think, if I remember correctly, the Death Riders were intimidating them and chasing them down, really. So they didn't want to get their asses kicked. So I think in one sense this works because the Young Bucks are very manipulative. So they're almost like, if we can't beat you, we'll join you. That may be in their psychology. but they're not going to say that to anybody. But I also understand how people will say that it's like a huge logic hole because they're like, okay, you know, these are people that have been harassing you and approaching you, and you know what, you have like, power to get them all fired. You have power to say that, okay, that's workplace harassment or whatever, but they're not but that's not the road they're going down, really, and they're also villains as well. So I'm also just very, very concerned about, I do agree with a lot of people that there's not a lot of logic. And pardon me, like, there's construction projects around the house, around my apartment complex. So I do agree with a lot of people that there's a lot of lack of logic. And ultimately what they're trying to do is they're trying to set up two shows. They're trying to set up Double or Nothing, Anarchy in the Arena. You need multiple people. And they're also trying to set up, Blood and Guts, because both of them are 5-man matches. And in my opinion, it does not make sense to have Blood and Guts after All In, because it's usually a July thing, Blood and Guts. It makes sense to have that before, something for June. And I think it should be a June pay-per-view, but I think it's going to be a television special. They're probably going to do that, even though I don't think that the way that they're getting there with people is going to be, a very sensible story. Like, I think I agree with people. There's a lot of plot holes in this, and there's a lot of characters making alliances or promoting alliances when that wouldn't make sense, really, So Kenny Omega comes out, and he says, "I forgive you for attacking me," and he does like a story where he's saying that he had a friend who had a dog that would shit all over the place, and for a while he'd said nothing, then he said something. And that's very similar to the Young Bucks shitting all over AEW and him just tolerating it for a while and then just now saying that he has to say something and cause a difference. And then he also says something like the paperwork that they're tearing up was how they're using company money to buy expenses, cars, jets, and also OnlyFans accounts. So this is kind of like a little what I say about Kenny Omega, that he has to really be careful when he talks like this, because there's a lot of critics that will say, hey, you know what, we don't get metaphors, we don't get people telling stories to be metaphors for what's going on, really. There's people who don't get that, or there's people who don't care to understand that. And then the other thing that I will say on top of that is that it's interjecting comedy when, this is not a serious, this is supposed to be a serious situation for Kenny Omega. These people nearly injured him, which could have caused like a permanent injury. These are people who made fun of the fact that he had diverticulitis. And also, these are people who are now forming like who want to form a super faction and like have both the right politics and the right wrestlers to run over AEW. And it's going to fall apart, really, and it is falling apart. So I think Kenny Omega interjecting the comedy was completely inappropriate and lacks a lot of self-control. And it just says that, there are just some people who can't turn off the comedy, so it just doesn't work. So I like what he said, too. Like, it's not the Death Riders. You killed AEW. And what happens is that he tries to fight them. Then Okada comes down, and then Swerve Strickland saves Kenny Omega. And then what happens is that Swerve gets attacked by Pac, really. So in the opening segment you have the Ops, which is Samoa Joe, Katsuyori Shibata, and Hook, but you just have Shibata in that, and then you have the Young Bucks, you have Kenny Omega, and then you also have Swerve Strickland, and then you have Pac. So you have like a lot of people that do matter and you also did a segment with the Death Riders a little bit. So what I have to say is that I like that they featured all the main people, all the main characters, because you just had a random match, like you open with like Blake Christian versus Anthony Bowens, which they're having on Collision. It doesn't make sense. You have to have something that really ties in or something like that. So I think that I understand why they opened the show with this, and I'm not completely upset with it because I do feel that this is going to hook the audience really. So I think, and it also kind of created the tone, which is, this is like for the heart and soul of AEW. So having this later on in the show and probably opening with like Osprey and the 8-man tag match probably wouldn't be appropriate really. So I just really think that, like for what they've had as options, like this was definitely probably the best they can do for an opening. But I probably would have opened it with a Mercedes Moné like squash match or something like that. And maybe the Death Riders are teasing that Mercedes joining or something like that. I probably would have done that. Then I would have ended with the Death Riders and everything like that. Really, or I would have had Shibata lose to John Moxley, and then the Young Bucks saying like, "Hey, you know what? On the announced team, hey, we're gonna talk about what happened and why we did it during the main event. Moxley, you have to be down here there and all that stuff. So they could have formatted it better. And then you had Pac versus Strickland. This was the best match on the card. So it starts with them exchanging fisticuffs. Swerve does a snake ice. Swerve throws Pac into the guardrail and steps. Swerve hits a buckle bomb. Swerve is pissed. Swerve's very pissed off, so he's having a more brawler or more like hard hitting, not letting him get a bunch of offense, not letting Pac get a bunch of offense. So this was all appropriate. There was some fuck Booker T chants. Swerve stomp from the top rope. And I don't remember Pac having a lot of offense in this match. So I was kind of like saying it made Pac look very, very weak. However, there's backstage reports that he got injured. So I can be understanding why this happened, really. I think it would have been stronger if they improvised, where Swerve hurts him or Swerve causes a DQ, like puts him through a table, or the announce table with a double foot stomp, and then after that, they say, oh, well, Pac can't continue, or he hits him with a chair a couple of times, and they're like, oh, well, Pac needs to be, protected and escorted out with medical. Like, I think that would have been a little bit better, end with like a no contest or a DQ, because that way you don't have the same type of easy pinfall type of thing. So it's revealed that next Wednesday it's going to be Mercedes Moné versus either Harley Cameron or Athena. And I was saying to myself, again, like I know why Mercedes is getting that match and why they're doing that for two things. Boston is her hometown, but it kind of tells you we know that Mercedes is going to win because obviously she's from Boston. And then the other thing about this is that it's a bad choice because I think that what they should do is have Athena win. Athena gets on the microphone and then she says, hey, it's winner take all, really. So what's going to happen is it's going to be Athena and Mercedes at the main event of Supercard of Honor. And it's going to be for the winner gets the ROH Women's Championship and goes forward in the Owen Hart tournament. Like, those are the things that Athena puts on the line, really. And then Mercedes comes out. Like, that would be appropriate. That would allow them to have like a 40-minute banger. That would create a lot of interest for the Supercard of Honor show. But they're going to have it next week. And more than likely, because Mercedes is from Boston, if you were to bet money on it, Mercedes is going to win. And they have to make sure the show is a really big deal because obviously it's WrestleMania weekend, so they have to go above and beyond. But this is like one of the few things they announced. The next things they announced, Adam Page versus a wild card. And this is actually going to be really interesting because I think it could be Swerve Strickland or it could be Darby Allin. But it's going to be but they have to make, if they care about who it's going to be, they have to make sure that it's good. If it's like a jobber or somebody who really doesn't matter, then, they just screw the pooch on it. And if they have somebody like Wheeler Yuta or one of the Bucks or John Moxley and then Adam Page loses, it doesn't make any sense really. It has to be, I would do Adam Page versus Swerve Strickland. I think that would be the way to do it. And the Young Bucks preordained that. But obviously, because they do bad booking in AEW, that's a good choice. And imagine what would have happened if they announced that and they sold tickets. Because a lot of people will be going to the Boston show if they did that. They'll probably say, hey, we're not going to Fenway Park. stadium. We're going to the Celtic, the Boston Garden or whatever. Like that would be something that people would pay a lot of money for. So it's unfortunate that they're not doing that. And then backstage, Paige tries to find Swerve, and then Nana tries to give an apology to Paige, and he's not hearing that. So I like that continuity. And the next match was the 8-man match for $400,000. So the backstage segment where Ospreay was asking people what they wanted, and Mark Briscoe just losing his mind and sounding crazy. I kind of say it's really sad because Mark Briscoe, he's a really great wrestler. He can talk in the microphone. Like, imagine if you had him. If you imagine what would happen if you built up to Mark Briscoe versus John Moxley, like that would be a great match, really. And with Mark Briscoe talking crazy like that, like honestly, he should be working for WWE. But he's too much in a jobber role. Like I really, really think that there's a lot that he can do. And imagine if he was the AEW champion and he was talking crazy like that. That would get over so big. Like he definitely has megastar status to him, but he's booked very, very poorly. Loses way too much. And what I would say that it was, I wasn't really into this match because when you have like these 8-man matches, you can't really follow what's going on. So I just like watched some of it and I was like, hey, it's just a regular little Ospreay match. It's just a lot of really crazy moves. Ospreay's gonna win because Tony blows him. He's Tony's favorite wrestler and Dave Meltzer's favorite wrestler. He's gonna win this. But it also kind of shows like those 4 people: Ospreay, Speedball, Kevin Knight, and Briscoe, and I'll even say Ricochet as well. They all have that type of, I'm here, I want to take this seriously, I want to have fun with this, I care about how much I'm being paid. You put me on pay-per-views, I matter. Like these 5 people, even like Leo Rush and Axel Andretti, they all have this. It really feels like they all really, really give a shit about where they're at with AEW and not ripping off Tony or not hoping to sit at home and just collect a check, really. So I really see the passion and I like that. But I didn't watch this match that much. And then the Hurt Syndicate celebration, like I said, it's a great thing for the 9 o'clock main event. You gotta hold your audience. They do a toast. MJF comes down and he speaks in a way like he's saying like, oh well, I did this thing for you. You guys are gonna help me become the AEW champion. Almost like how some people talk to get a favor, or sometimes you may have parents that are like, oh well, you know what, you're gonna do this for me, you're gonna do that for me, I'm gonna do this for you, and this is how it's gonna go down without even asking you. So it's kind of very clear that MVP's holding his patience with MJF and finds it cute, and then Lashley and Shelton are kind of like. Are kind of like, I just see the bullshit, really. And I would also say, too, that I really like that they had a vote of how he joins the Hurt Syndicate. And what happens is Lashley gives him a thumbs down and Shelton gives him a thumbs down. I like that Shelton did that because they could have had Shelton give him a thumbs up or whatever, really, but he gives him a thumbs down. I like that because sometimes, or like a middle thumb, and I kind of like how Shelton just made a choice, really, because sometimes in a lot of like things like this, they don't allow characters to make a choice. They kind of they make people kind of iffy, really. But I get, and I like that because Bobby is saying to MVP, how MJF is, MJF, screws people over. So I like this, and then the rest of the show I really didn't follow that much. You had Thunder Rosa versus Chris Statlander. I kind of knew Chris Statlander was going to win because Chris Statlander is a bigger body woman. So she kind of looks, more athletic and more like, dangerous. Like she kind of has she and Will Nightingale are just bigger body people. So I kind of said to myself, she looks way more formidable than Thunder Rosa. So I kind of knew that Thunder Rosa was not going to win because she looks like a legitimate athlete. And then the main event was the Death Riders, Claudio and Wheeler versus the Ops. It's like what people said, Wheeler Yuta may not be a good choice for a main event, but I think, as I said, imagine if you opened the show with this. Or I think, with all the choices, should have opened the show, and then what happened at the beginning should have ended the show. or they should have opened like a Mercedes Moné squash match to like, so she does like a heel promo type of thing. She sets up, and then they talk about what's gonna happen at Boston, really, and then it ends with the Ops, coming out and getting attacked, and then what happens is that Samoa Joe and the Ops win, and then what happens is they get attacked by the Death Riders. So it's like what they're trying to do. I think they're trying to set up Adam Page, Swerve Strickland, and the Ops versus the Death Riders with a mix of the Young Bucks, for Anarchy in the Arena. And I think that would be a really great match because Samoa Joe, like, he is one of the most appropriate people for a feud with the Death Riders, and he is also one of the most appropriate people with a feud with John Moxley because they're both into violence and taking things a little too far, really. And like I've said, you kind of see how Samoa Joe is one of the best, and like AEW, quite honestly, he's in that, small round Mount Rushmore people who can talk on the microphone. And he's probably even the best at it because he has like so much emphasis in his voice, and he has a lot more intensity, and he doesn't know, and he knows how to be long. He can tell a long promo and then a short promo because with MGF he tells a lot more longer promos. So I think with Samoa Joe, and also too Samoa Joe, the way that he speaks is like you mess with the wrong person. That's really how he sounds whenever he talks. Whenever he talks, really. So I'm looking forward to that. I actually want to go down to Phoenix and watch Anarchy in the Arena, and really see what they do. But I would say that I think like as I said, this show, to me, I liked it a lot. I liked it more than I hated it, and I would say that I think the transitions were very strong in this show. You did a segment with Chris Jericho, leaving, and a lot of people are like that because they're hoping that he's gone forever, really, or that he's taking some time off. But I really think that, as I said, I think the explanation with the Young Bucks, why they helped out Swerve, it is controversial. There are some plot holes in it, and I agree with that. And then you also have Kenny Omega adding his 48-hour film project comedy. In other words, when you should be serious, when it works to be serious, when it's beneficial to be serious, you have him, make a dog shit joke. And that's not good. Also, too, that, you're talking about next week surpassing AEW, WCW, really. So, and Boston is one of the biggest cities in New England. So I kind of tell myself, why the hell don't you have a really awesome card? Why the hell don't you recap all the matches and have some really good matches? This should be a really, really, really big deal for it should be a really, really big deal for Boston, and I don't really see any of that. I think that they're just gonna have a few. It's just gonna be regular Dynamite. They're gonna have a few good matches, and they're also going to maybe not put their all in it because they're going to say, hey, it's WrestleMania weekend, so why should we actually, do the best job that we can do, when they should be doing that every single time. Or when you have WrestleMania, you should be like, hey, we're still going to try, we're still going to put out a good effort. And I worry that they're not going to do that. I don't think they will do that. But I also will say that one thing I like about the show is that I like the transitioning that they've done through things. Obviously, Anarchy in the Arena and Blood and Guts are matches that draw people, so they have to make sure it doesn't come out of nowhere, and they have to make sure, whatever story that they tell, it's not like thrown together at the last minute, because that's the worst thing that you can do. And I also will say that I think Samoa Joe is the best person right now to feud with the Death Riders after Swerve, so and it should also be very evidential, and Tony Khan's not gonna get it, but it's evidential when you see how much better a person like Samoa Joe is on the microphone versus somebody like Moxley. And like I said, if you want to do Blood and Guts, and you want to make that pay-per-view. Imagine if you had Samoa Joe versus John Moxley, and you did something where Samoa Joe actually wins it, and then you have him, hold the AEW championship, or you do something like he holds the championship, he gets beaten down, and then the Young Bucks say, hey, we're going to use our power, and they decide to pull the title back on John Moxley and whatever, and to a lot of boos and whatnot, really. There's a lot of things that they can do creatively. But I really just think that, it's as I said, I think Samoa Joe is the right people to feud with. I'm happy to see him get a big spot. He knows how to rise to the occasion. He's a wrestler that, if Samoa Joe is going to be in an Anarchy Arena match or a Blood and Guts match, you know that you made the worst mistake of your life, because he really comes off like you made the worst mistake by fucking with him. So it's gonna be really interesting to see what comes out of it. I'm interested to see what's gonna happen at the Boston show next week that I'm going to, but I'm gonna do other activities in Boston just because I want to get the most out of it if the show sucks. But I think overall for a show, I would give it a C+. I really think that, like I said, I appreciate the continuations that they've done, and I think Samoa Joe in Blood and Gut and in Anarchy in the Arena is a really good choice, really. But definitely, the reasonings for all this is kind of like a clusterfuck and plot holes, and that's what people argue about. And I think the other thing that I'm going to say about it is that I'm not sure how they're going to build up Anarchy in the Arena and make it have a big fight feel, because that was lacking in Dynasty. So they have to make sure, like as I said, this is like, the last, the final lap. Really, they have to make sure the next 3 months really makes All In a really big deal, and that's kind of what they're leading to. All In with the Death Rider conclusion or continuation, but they have to just do whatever they can to make sure fan interest stays very positive. And if it's not working, they have to make some immediate changes. And if they stubbornly go into it, then, like I said, I think I have to look up the results really, but I think they said they've only sold maybe close to 12 or 13,000 tickets for All In, and it's a 50,000 seat arena. And what are they going to do? Are they going to pull a AEW Grand Slam in Australia and make it a collision show? And then the other thing that I will say is this show, I don't remember. I think it was 3,000. I think it was close to 3,000 people in a 3,000 seat arena, something like that. So yes, they drew very well tonight. They probably did maybe over 80% capacity, if I'm correct. But still, you have 2,900 people coming to a show, and that's not good when WWE can draw a lot, really. So it's very evidential that it's very problematic, and the Death Rider things is not working. So, what's going to happen if they're deciding not to pivot? So there are going to be long-term consequences for that, and I also understand why they're not pivoting, because they may believe in their final vision, or they may just be too lazy to do rewrites, So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But the good news is that, logically, there's two endings to the Death Riders. It can end it All In, or it can end at World's End. But if they extend to World's End, that's going to kill the company, really, So we'll see what happens, really. So, the show had a lot. The show is very 50-50 to me, but I really appreciate the improvements in the structure of the show. I appreciate the improvements in the transitioning of the show. I appreciate that they considered the main event the 9 o'clock and the 10 o'clock, because they really don't do that. But ultimately, they have to think a little bit more about they need to think a little bit more about of those three choices, which one should be the main event, which one will be the strongest main event. And I think the next thing that I would say is just keep telling really good stories. The story of Anthony Bowens could be something compelling. The story of Kyle Fletcher can be compelling, and other people as well, really. So keep having really good stories, and because the Death Riders thing is not a good story, there's other things out there that can be good stories to kind of supplement all that. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see what happens, really, and that be that.